No. Probably I'll ask you, to each talk for, 7 or 8 minutes. And I'm going to be asking people if they have questions or comments or anything like that. And if you want to bounce off each other, I'll open that up as a possibility and just ask you if anybody wants to jump in and say anything. And especially the two of you who did the human bar graph, you might want to go back and forth with each other a little bit about your experiences, what worked, what didn't, what you did differently. And so hopefully we might get some questions in the chat. If we do, you might notice it, or I will actually really pause and look at what's in the chat and read it out loud and ask you to respond to that if it's to one of you. Okay, and then the last 15 minutes, I'm going to say a few things, and then we'll end.
Cynthia.
Yes.
This is Valerie. Just wanted to
Hi.
say hello. How are you?
I'm doing great. So good to hear your voice.
It is good to hear you, and we really appreciate you doing this. So I just wanted to say hi before it started, but good luck and thank you.
Well, and listen, Valerie and everybody else at ACE of Florida, I just want to say that working with the teachers has been so great. I'm so impressed with what the teachers came up with and that they got me photographs and slides and things like that. It's just going to make it a much richer discussion. So I want to send a lot of appreciation to all of you.
We do appreciate them doing that too. Thank you. I'm going to just turn it over to you, but I just wanted to say hi.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Y'all have a good webinar.
All right. So, Michael, it's 2 o'clock. We could wait a couple more minutes, see if we get more people joining in, or we could just kind of dive in and see if people join in late as we go.
I recommend let's just give it maybe 2 more minutes as people may be downloading the Citrix platform on their computer. Let's just give it a couple more minutes.
Okay, great. Okay, well, maybe we should get started just by saying hello and welcoming people to the webinar. And I'd like to give people a chance to perhaps introduce themselves and also practice using the chat box. I don't know if people have experience in webinars or not, but it would be nice if you were familiar with how to use the chat. So if you look on the right-hand side of your computer, you'll see the word chat at the bottom of a list of gray menu items. At least that's what it is on my screen. and you see that you can type a message. So I'm doing one right now, just says hello everyone. And if anybody wants to try practicing, just say something right now. Just say hello, say where you are, what county you're in Florida, what the temperature is in your region. I'll tell you what it is here for me. 55 and rainy. We don't get much of a break up here in New England, so I want to hear all your reports about how it's 85 and sunny down there in Florida. So, anybody find their chat box yet? It'd be great if you could just put a word in there and hit enter so that we can see that you know how to use the chat box. Okay, Michael, can you hear me? I just want to make sure people can hear me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, why don't you put something in the chat box, Michael, just to show how it can be done. And others, you know, anybody else in the room on the webinar, it'd be great to hear from you. Oh, I see some people are starting to say things. Okay, my name is Cynthia Peters. I am the editor of The Change Agent. I had the great good luck to be down in Florida recently, where I went to 3 different regions and did workshops in 3 different parts of the state on civics and workforce skills. And we looked a lot at the overlap between civics and workforce skills. And it was really great to be able to meet teachers doing really good work on the ground and have this opportunity to kind of think about how we can both promote civics in our classroom along with skills that are really important in the workplace and really important for our students getting ahead and being able to meet their goals. We're going to be together on this webinar for an hour, and I have an agenda up here that you can just get a brief look at and get a sense of how it's going to go. A few minutes just for intros and welcome. And then a big chunk of the webinar is going to be dedicated to the teacher share. Dana Foster and Daisy Shaw are going to be sharing how they use the human bar graph in their classroom. Bryce Forrester is going to look at workplace safety in the classroom. And Tracy Dean is going to talk about what she did with the All About Food issue. After that, I'm going to take just the last 5 or 10 minutes or so to share some tips and tricks about how to navigate hard conversations in the classroom. And I'm going to remind you about some ideas for using audio in the classroom. And then finally, at the very end of the webinar, I just want to give you a heads up now, but I'll remind you of this later. Leanne will be sending out a survey, and we hope that you'll be able to take the literally 1 minute that it will take you to fill out the survey and respond. So after the webinar, check your email for something from Leanne and take that 1 minute to fill out the survey. It's just going to have 5 questions. Okay? And as I'm going along, I really encourage people to use the chat box. Just put your questions in there. Every once in a while I'll pause and look over there and see what questions are coming up, so please feel free to make this as interactive as you can. Okay, what I'm going to do now is turn the microphone over to Dana. Dana did the human bar graph activity in her classroom. And Dana, if you unmute yourself, we'll be able to hear you, and you can just walk us through what you learned from doing this, how you did it, and how you adapted it possibly, or what you did to kind of make it a rich experience for your students.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Cynthia. This is Dana Foster. So the text that I'm using is in a short adult ESL class this summer, just a 6-week class. The text I'm using is called Workplace Plus. The text is a little old, but it still does a really good job of laying out units that pertain specifically to work, a little bit to life, but also a lot that relates to work. And it meshed really nice because the unit that I was covering when I did the bar chart was your time, and it starts out, the very first page on this starts out talking about federal minimum wage. So before we did the bar chart thing, we had already talked about this. I think we had one session about this. The book is dated 2009, And so the minimum wage that was listed in the book was $5.15 an hour. So one of the first things I did was to go on to the Fair Labor Practices website for the Department of Labor and printed out a little information about what the current minimum wage is, being $7.25. So so it was a good fit for the unit that I was going to teach. So the first thing I did was put up this picture of the white guys in the car with the money bags on top and the people kind of down around the car. And we talked about this. It's okay, tell me, what do you see here? Who are the people? What are they doing? What do you think this means? Had a fairly good discussion about, well, okay, there's a bunch of white guys in a car. They're all happy and smiling. They got money bags on top. It's a really expensive car. Look at the little dollar sign up there. I know the people down there on the ground, they're not happy. They're raising their fists. They're really upset about something. So sort of open up this whole discussion about this, this divide between guys in the car and then the people down below.
Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yeah, you can go on to the next slide, Cynthia. Thanks.
Okay.
So before I actually showed them this slide, I had another slide that was sort of a generic bar chart because I wasn't sure that everyone knew how to read a bar chart. So I just put up this generic bar chart, and I said, okay, the bottom line, the line at the bottom, we call that the floor of the chart. Top line at the top, that's called the ceiling. What do you think these things are called on the side? Oh, those are walls, teacher. Right, those are walls. So and then we have these little lines in between. Those we call segments. So we sort of looked at this make-believe bar chart and talked about what that actually represents. And then I showed this one. So we went through this, and I said, well, this is a line chart. This isn't a bar chart. This is a line chart. But it's showing you how the family income changed from 1947 to 2010 and how it was different by race. And I said, give a brief explanation of what the word median means. I really didn't belabor that point. And I think most of the students in this, and there are some that are more advanced than others, but when I flashed this chart up on the screen, there was almost an audible gasp from the students because almost all, in that class, all of my students are native Spanish speakers. So, they saw themselves in this chart, which was really, and I had not anticipated that, that it would have such an impact on them. I thought I would have to explain to them what this thing means, but they pretty quickly picked up on this. I said, okay, we picked out a couple of years. Okay, so where did it start out for Latinos, and how much difference was that between whites and African Americans? And we talked about how the line sort of goes up and then down a little bit, then up and then down again. So we spent a few minutes talking about this chart. And then we went on to the next chart, which was actually the bar chart that we were going to use human bar chart out of. So when I put this up, I said we had already talked about something called minimum wage. We'd already discussed that. Excuse me, I had to take a drink of something. But we had not yet talked about this concept of living wage. So we talked about the chart. Okay, 1968. See, what was the minimum wage? Oh, and I told them a little story. I said, when I started work right out of high school, it was 1973. What do you think the minimum wage was? And they all guessed. They were all a little high. And I said $1.75 an hour. So, but we looked at this chart, and of course it says $1.60 for 1968, and they were surprised by that. So then we went through, minimum wage for 68, 79. What is it now? It's $7.25 an hour. So okay, so now if that's minimum wage, what do you think living wage is? What do you think that means? They were silent for a minute, and then one of them said, well, teacher, I think that means what it takes just to be able to get by. I said, you're correct. It's covering just essentially the basics. Eating, having a place to live, having some clothes to wear, things like that. So, and I sort of as I pointed this, we were talking about this, pointing this out, how the gap keeps getting wider and wider. I think, well, let's go on to the next chart, and then I'll say what I did here. So we went out to the hallway outside the classroom, and I had blue painter's tape. And so there at the back toward the door, that was the floor of the chart. So I put that out on the floor of the chart, and then I ran a piece of tape up the side. And I said, here's the wall of the chart. Then we had the line that was the ceiling. So then I called. I said, I need 2 volunteers to be 1968. So the 2 people that are closest to the windows, they were 1968. I said, okay, here's the, and on the walls I actually marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way up through 11. There were tiles here, so 11 tiles. So you place yourself where you think you should be on this line. So they kind of arranged themselves. So I said, okay, now who wants to be 1979? More volunteers. All right. So here are the numbers. Where do you think you're going to be on this chart? So they, the 2 that are in the middle, you can't, the tall guy in the white shirt, you can't see. There's a woman standing behind him. So they place themselves on that chart. And then the 2 women that are on the far left of the actual slide there were the 2015. So I said, so I asked them, what do you see? What do you notice about this? Oh, teacher, there's a big gap between the ones that are standing on the 2015 line. And what do you think that means? Well, that means that, minimum wage really needs to be raised up to something closer to a living wage.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Wow.
So I think it really worked well. I think you see they're kind of grinning. I think they got the point on this. The thing I might have done a little bit differently if I do it again was maybe to not show them the 3rd bar chart, but to just give them the numbers instead, and not so that they couldn't visually see it, but just talk about, okay, the minimum wage, living wage for 68 to 79, and then 15, then go out and then do the living bar chart, the human bar chart, rather than just put this up first. To go back and look at this after we had done the exercise.
What a great idea! You're just getting them to predict, and then say put them where the minimum wage is, and ask them what do you think you would really need to have a living wage or something like that, and get them to sort of look at that and experience that, and then come back and look at the actual data.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea.
Yeah, you have really, I loved hearing about this because you, and I want to open it up to other people, other teachers on the call. If you want to add a question in the chat box, or if you just want to unmute yourself, we're a pretty small group, so we could unmute everybody actually, Michael, honestly, because then people might.
Dina, I have a question for you. What level do you teach?
Tests are they're low, intermediate to advanced.
Okay. Okay.
And that's based on CASAS.
Okay. Thanks.
Into higher concepts. So yeah, good work doing that. Let me, is there any other question for Dana? Either put it in the chat box or unmute yourself and we'll get your question. And if you think of your question later, that's fine. You can still just put it in the chat box and I'll be monitoring that. But maybe what we should do is go ahead and hear from Daisy now, and then we can kind of talk about the 2 together, if that makes sense. So let me go on to Daisy's slides. This was her first slide. Tell us about this. This was like something you did on the whiteboard.
Right. So majority of my students tend to struggle with topics like charts and maps and graphs. So before diving into the human bar graph activity, I had to make sure they understand how to interpret a graph and how a graph works exactly. Because majority of my students, they are at low beginning, some of them are at high intermediate level. So during the first week of class, I actually stole my boss's idea. I don't know if some of you know Pamela Jo Wilson from Palm Beach County, but I stole her idea, and what I did was I had some of my students create a bar graph based on the languages that they speak. So how that worked was I gave each student some post-it notes, and for instance, blue was for Creole, green for French, yellow for Spanish, and pink for Portuguese. And I don't have an image of this, so that's why I'm going and talking about it in detail. Students were to write their name on the appropriate post-it or post-its if they spoke multiple languages. They were to then come up to the board and stick these in a straight vertical line in the designated language area. And of course, I used this data to create a bar graph on the board. And because this was something they could relate to, the majority of the students understood this whole mapping concept right away. They knew how to create a bar graph and how to interpret it as well. And then the following Monday, when they returned to school, I asked them to tell me one thing that they did the day before on Sunday. And that's when we came up with this graph here. I had the students actually come up to the board and create this graph. So majority of the students, as you can see in the picture here, ate dinner with their families. Then a lot of them went to church as well. And only 5 out of 28 students practiced English, and 5 had to work on Sunday. So that was that. And then the third day is when I kind of, like Dana started talking about minimum wage, and it is how it's $8.10 now in the state of Florida. And yep, the picture is up now. Okay, so as you see in this picture, the gentleman on the right side, he is actually a surgeon, not in real life. I'm going to explain that in a minute. He's a surgeon. The lady in the middle, she is a registered nurse. The gentleman in the white shirt, he is a certified mechanic. And then the last one on the left side, the girl on the left, she is a cashier at Walmart. So we talked about different jobs and how and the salaries, how these people make money, and if they were to get a raise, how that would affect them, and how that affects like all these different professions. But the one thing that I really liked, first of all, students were engaged and entertained, and they were involved, and they were willing to learn because they asked so many different questions like, okay, teacher, how about this? I want to become a computer programmer. How much money do they make in the state of Florida? And how about the schooling? Is it like, do I have to go to college and get a 4-year degree, or do I need a specific certificate? And then one of the gentlemen in my class, he pretty much gave a motivational speech, and he's like, look at this. You want to set your goals high. And you know what? He didn't speak perfect English, but at that point I didn't care. I'm like, go for it. This is what it's all about, you know? He said, set your goals high, work hard, and make your dreams come true. You're young, and you're here in this country, land of opportunities. Make it happen for yourself. You don't want to be a cashier for the rest of your life. You want to be where this man is right now. You want to become a surgeon and all of that. And then, of course, I shared my personal story with them that I have been there, done that too. Like, I remember in high school working a minimum wage job, but I had my goals. I didn't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. And so, I mean, overall, it was very fun and interactive, and they got a lot out of it. They learned a lot. They asked a lot of questions. It was a good activity, and I will definitely be doing this again next term with my next group.
Wow, it sounds like you got so much student engagement from this that it just made bridges to all these other kinds of English learning opportunities. Like
Right.
anytime anybody steps up and makes a motivational speech, that is so to be embraced, right? Because that's
Uh-huh.
so, yeah, good. I'm really, it's great. I like how you um, just created so many different, like, let's look back. One thing I like is that you started with these very simple bar graphs. Like the post-it note bar graph is brilliant, and I think it's so true. When somebody builds their own bar graph, they get a whole different understanding of what a bar graph is, you know?
Right.
So using
Right.
those post-it notes is really smart. And then just taking, the hours that people spent doing, wait, no, is this hours or numbers of people who worked, went to
N-
church, studied English?
number of
Numbers of
students.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, these are just such good scaffolding activities. So and then to have a human bar graph again, you're in 3 dimensions. People are doing
Hmm.
something physical. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I always like try to provide like real life examples or use content that my students can relate to because of course it always works better. Like they get it. I see the lights going on like, yes, I understand. Woohoo.
Mhm. Right, right. And we love that when the lights go
Uh-huh.
on. It's a great
Exactly.
feeling. Yeah. Thank you, Daisy. Does anybody have a question for Daisy and or Dana if you've had a chance to think about, how they set this up in their classroom? Anything you want to notice about it or whether it makes you want to try it? Bryce, could you bring this into the prison? What do you think? You might be on mute, Bryce.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
Okay, yeah, I like the idea of doing this. It would be difficult for me to take the pictures and show you proof of doing it, but definitely, definitely would be something that would be kind of neat to do in the prison.
Yeah.
I was wondering about Dana's. She put up a bar graph, and in her bar
Mhm.
graph, it shows the Latinos not coming in to the picture, and there it is, until 79. So we didn't have data in our country of Latinos. Is that when there was a huge influx of coming into the country that we started taking data down? Or what was going on?
Um,
I kind of wondered about that too, Bryce, and I didn't see anything in the footnote on the chart that explained that. But Cynthia, maybe if you're a little more familiar with the data, maybe you can.
I don't know. I would go to the faireconomy.org website, which I think the link is right here. See that at the bottom of the screen, faireconomy.org. And yeah, go see if the asterisks or any of the footnotes. I didn't include them on this slide, but some of the footnotes might explain why the data doesn't start till 1979. Certainly, we had a lot of Latinos in the United States before 1979. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why that doesn't start till then.
The what the footnote does say, and maybe this explains it in a roundabout way, is that the word Hispanic was used at one point, but that's, it's now Latino is considered more acceptable. So it might be that uh, prior to prior to that date, it was Hispanic, and they just chose not to put it up there. I'm not really sure though.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Daisy, this is one of your slides too. I think
Right.
you also
Uh-huh.
brought this image into the classroom.
Right, because this was an image that you had shared at the training, and I used it as a picture prompt. And if you look to the left, I have this list right next to my whiteboard because I mean, this is how I look at it. If my students don't know who, what, where, when, why, and how, they're really not going to be able to answer a lot of questions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not just on their CASAS test, but also in real life. So I always have that there. But anyway, so we started out with who. So they said, okay, we see 3 people and maybe related, maybe dad and 2 sons, kind of like that. Talked about all of that. Came up with the list of words that are on the whiteboard there. And on the right side as well, how they were like, well, the father didn't really need a crate. And how the kids, even the dad, they all look happier in the picture on the right, the equity picture, compared to the equality picture. They've got their hands up, they're all excited and all.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the students described the 3 people, and then they said maybe they're poor, they don't have money, they're like us, maybe they're immigrants. And and I mean,
Nice.
yeah, I use picture prompts to activate prior knowledge, to get them to communicate, to get them to talk, because I want to hear them talking, and I want to hear their ideas. And again, this was one of those really good images. They got a lot out of it. And there's another picture that I think I might not have shared with you, is where I had my students come up and kind of we used two examples. One was an equality example, one was an equity example, and they kind of lined up in front of the class and did their thing. And of course, it was they were engaged and they learned a lot out of it. They got a lot out of it. Yep.
Yeah, so good to hear. It's great. One thing we talked about during the workshop was just how these words equality and equity are fairly complex concepts, but with the help and the support of this image, you can introduce pretty complex stuff to even beginning English learners. So it sounds like you did that, and you built in all this other vocabulary and gave people the tools they needed to be able to talk. So it's great teaching, and definitely when the lesson resonates with the students, everyone just gets more lively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Daisy. It's really good to hear from you. Really good to see these images. I'm so happy about how you took these pictures and shared them. It just makes it so much more fun to have this conversation when we have these great visuals to go with it. So thank you. All right, so is Tracy Dean on the call? Tracy, you might need to unmute yourself if you're in. Or Michael, you could let me know if she seems to have registered.
Yeah, she is registered, and she had logged in. She has self-muted herself.
Okay.
And she may have lost internet connectivity.
Okay.
That she is currently offline.
Okay. All right. Well, so what we'll do is we'll skip to Bryce then, and if Tracy finds her way back onto the webinar, we'll go back and pick her up. So I don't know if anybody can track Tracy, like call her or email her or something like that to see if she needs any support, but that would be great if you could do that, and I'll skip forward to Bryce's slides. So Bryce, come on and tell us what you did with your students.
Okay, well, first I think I want to say that the talking point that I have from the change agent has been so helpful. Having this magazine, getting my guys to read anything at all is really a challenge, but then there's articles in here that they really just grab onto. For example, I read an article in Working for 19 Cents Per Hour. I immediately related to that, and it was written by an inmate, and he went into a little bit of the history about gathering information, what to do, how to peacefully riot or protest, I should say, and make their voice heard, and and that was really powerful. So immediately when I brought this material back from the webinar, I found that this is some powerful stuff. If I could get the guys to read anything, and they did it independently, they just said, they saw the magazine, and they said, hey, can I read that? And I'm like, absolutely. And let's talk about it afterwards, by the way. And that's pretty much how I did these lessons with this activity 4. And you see I have a quote up here that you put there for me. This was a great opportunity to read and talk with the students at different levels than just the teacher and student. And standing up in front of the classroom and giving a brief lesson is one thing, but when I can sit down with them in a group and I could share, and this is what I did, I asked them, well, would you mind reading for me out loud? I had one of my guys that was very, very hesitant to read, but he looked at me and he saw me with a very affirming facial expression. I said, you can do this. And he read out loud to the group, and afterwards he confessed to me. He said, I have a speech impediment, and I don't really like to talk in front of everybody, but this was the kind of thing that really interests me, and I was just brave, and he took the bold step to go ahead and speak. And I told him how proud I was of him for doing that and overcoming his inability to speak without having the stutter. And I said I was just so proud, and really made it a good lesson for us to do. So
That's an amazing story, Bryce. That's really amazing.
and that's just one of many things. This stuff really unfolds. It's great to have stuff that's pertinent like this.
Mm-hmm.
So let me share with you then a little bit about the lesson. As I was working on workforce safety, this was lesson number 4 from the change agent. I went through the instructions, and it's pretty much step by step. Your lesson plans are great on how to do it. So the first task I had was to obtain some material from OSHA, and that's the workers' rights and the job safety and health brochures that need to go at every workplace. I see you put it up there on the screen now. And so I said, oh, great, I better do this when I'm planning to do my lesson about a week in advance. I said, shoot, I hope I have enough time, thinking to myself, to get this there. And if not, I'll just go with it because it's the last thing I need to do with the guys. In 2 days, it was in the mail. It just arrived immediately. So I'm just saying that for any teachers out there that are trying to get the material together, this is free material, and they send it to you right away, no questions asked. So it was great to go over and have that right there in front of us so we can look at it. Everybody that I spoke with during this lesson knew about the workers' laws, or they had seen these posters in their workplace before. So it wasn't some kind of foreign thing that I was just introducing to them all of a sudden. They knew about it, but it's nice to have a copy of it anyway, not just something I can print off the internet and be black and white, but the real thing, the Slicko material was nice to have that.
Great. Yeah, and they probably had seen it in their workplaces a lot, but they probably hadn't actually read it.
Right, so they could relate. They could relate to it, that it was there. Oh, yeah, I saw that in the staff break room when I was working at thus and such places. Yeah, so they knew about it. So the material, that came later, but before we even got to the posters, I had to obtain them, of course, so I had them ready when I started teaching. But then it was a series of articles that we read from various issues of the change agent. And the first time I did the lesson with a group of guys, I didn't read them in order. I distributed the pages to the guys and asked volunteers to read them. And somebody said, well, how come he read first? And I realized there were page numbers so it should have been read in order. So the second time I did it, I read them according to the pages. But it didn't matter because they all related to one another as far as what it was building up, but culminating to the point it was trying to make is the fair labor practices. And there was an article that I had brought in from Current Events. Cynthia, I think you had forwarded me the link to it, and I said, well, I'll try that. Yes, this is with the now appointed Judge Gorsuch, a decision that he had made prior to his appointment to the Supreme Court that really opened up a lot of discussion. Was did he judge fairly, or was this the wrong thing for him to do? And if this is the way he makes decisions, should he be somebody that's on our Supreme Court? So it was a very good article to read with the guys, and it sparked in them emotions among them that they were just bringing out this thing. He did what? How unfair that was that he would rule in favor of the employer who fired the truck driver.
Do you want to say real quick what the case of the frozen trucker was? Just can you remember the main
sentences? Sure, Cynthia. A truck driver was fired from his job because he was driving an all-nighter, I'll say, and late at night his brakes froze on the trailer, and he couldn't go anywhere. But he called in to get help from his company to come out and bail him out. But it was snowing and it was freezing, and he was running out of fuel in his cab to stay warm. So he took it upon himself to leave so he could go get the fuel he needed, and what seemed like he was saving his life. It became a desperate act of, hey, I have to survive. I'm not going to die tonight waiting for somebody to come and save me. But the judge had ruled that he had violated other people's safety by detaching his rig from the trailer and leaving it out there on the roadside without the power to light up the blinkers and flashers that show that it's stopped there, and then if anybody's out at night, wouldn't see it and possibly even crash into it. Mm-hmm. So the company fired him, the truck driver, and then he took the company to the court because he wanted to get his job back. But it was upheld. The company's decision was upheld, and he didn't get his job. So a lot of opinions came into play about that decision, you know, and you could have played the game. You know, I had some street smarts, let's say. My inmates are very street smart, and some of them said, you know, if he knew about these labor laws, and if the worst thing that was going to happen was that he was going to get frostbite, he should have held out for a little bit longer, and then when he took him to court, because he lost use of his hand or had to be amputated or something, then he could have sued them and he'd be set for the rest of his life. They brought out a whole other ideas about him. Like, no, you're right. Really could have done that if you had stayed with him. So it was really a great discussion. I really enjoyed talking with the guys about it, and a whole different level with them. And I hadn't had a chance before that to really have them open up to me and just have a normal discussion about something. So this was a great opportunity.
So great to hear how you kind of invited the power of their minds and their thinking, and their street smarts get to come out and be shown, and it created a bridge into them wanting to read. You know, as teachers, we're always wanting our students to read, right? And you made that happen. That's great.
Read, I'm just all for it. You know, and this was one of those things that they really wanted to read. So
yeah,
not to plug in, but I think. Definitely want to get a subscription to the Change Agent.
That would be great, you know, and because I know you can't really take advantage of the online materials too much. Well, you could as a teacher. You could access the PDFs of all the back issues, and you could print out the relevant pages. But it sounds like your guys might really enjoy having a magazine, you know, to kind of hold in their hands and look at and flip through and, you know, have their own literacy experience just holding a magazine.
Oh, they definitely. And, you know, to continue with the lesson, which the last article, the last activity was to go back then into making a presentation. And this is not something I was able to get that far with the gentlemen, to have them do that. The next step would be having them put things down on paper. And reading is one, and this helped overcome that. But then they just don't want to write anything down. It comes down to putting something on paper and pencil to express their thoughts. For them to share it verbally is one thing, but if they're putting it down on writing, then they're less likely to do it. So I'm still working on that part. The next part would be to review the poster and then have them come up with their own 1.5-minute presentation on what they've learned and just rewrite employers' rights, employees' rights and responsibilities for the employer. So that's the next step. I haven't gotten that far, but something else to do.
So great. Isn't it amazing how long these lessons last for? You know, they can really drag out, you know, not in a good way. You know, you can just go deeper and tackle more and more skills. So it's great. I'm glad you're going to work on that writing part and the poster part. One little strategy for when people have a hard time writing is to have people interview each other. And somebody can write notes about what the person says, and then those notes become like the beginning of an outline almost, or the beginning of some sentences and some paragraphs, and you know, so they're able to talk, but they have a harder time writing, and if somebody helps capture their talk, then it becomes writing, you know. So that might be a way to get them into expressing themselves on paper. Does anybody have any questions for Bryce about that experience? Bryce, that was, for me, I just want to say that was so great to hear. I really love how everybody's been so creative with these lessons and brought in, you know, different aspects, and then also kind of, it seems like everybody so far has really emphasized that the engagement level went up in your class, because this was content that people could grab hold of and they could relate to, and that's really exciting for me to hear. That's so good to hear. I love having that in my mind, you know, that little vision in my mind of students in a classroom feeling engaged. So glad you were able to do it. Thank you. Let's see. let me ask Michael if Tracy had any luck getting back on the call or get back on the webinar.
Yes, she is online, and I have unmuted her. Tracy, you there?
Tracy, you have
hear her in the background.
Yeah, Tracy, you have a little background music going on, it sounds like. All right, can you say something so we can? Doesn't sound too good. We can't really hear you. If you're talking, we can't really hear you. I can tell you're trying to talk, but we can't hear you. Okay. I think it may not be working, Tracy. Your audio may not be working. I'm so sorry about that. I'm going to just take people through your slides really quickly. If you want to add something to the chat box, if you can, that would be great, and I'll read it out loud to people. But your audio is not coming through. Just some background noise is coming through. So I'm really sorry about that, and I just so appreciate that you shared these slides. And what Tracy told me is she brought the All About Food issue into her classroom, and what they worked on mostly was this very beginning level picture story, which was made by a student. You can see her picture there. It's a little story about being a mom and trying to get her kids to eat healthy food and how hard that is. And, you know, she's got all these hand-drawn pictures here of her experience being a mom trying to get healthy food into her kids. And she comes up with the solution of making smoothies for them and putting lots of vegetables and fruits into a juicer. And the kids really, really loving it. So this is the piece she brought into her classroom. It's from pages 12 to 13 of the All About Food issue. And I think it's going to be another one like the other pieces we've talked about today, just where there's going to be a high level of engagement. People are going to be able to relate to it. People are going to know what it's like, you know, to be the mom coming home with all this healthy food and to find your kids have filled themselves up on junk food. So she also used from a different issue, from the Staying Safe in a Toxic World issue, this little activity on how to scale up or down using ratios. So this comes in really handy if you're trying to follow the directions on the back of, say, a cleanser or something. And it says put a quarter of a cup of cleanser with a gallon of water, but you only have a half-gallon container. You know, how are you going to do that? What are the proportions going to be? So she used this activity to try out the math. And this is a little fuzzy picture, but it shows she must have done an activity where she had people, they're holding up different measurement sizes, like half a teaspoon, a gallon, you know, half a gallon, things like that. So it looks like she got people up and out of their chairs and doing stuff with fractions, which is great. Fractions are so painful for people. If you can get people moving while you're doing fractions, it makes them less painful. So congratulations, Tracy. I'm sorry we can't be hearing directly from you about what brilliant teaching strategy you were using for this, but I really appreciate that you shared the pictures and we got a little idea of what you did. So thank you for that. It's almost 10 of, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit here and move to a couple of other things. You know, in the When We Fight, We Win issue, we have a whole section on LGBTQ issues. And I put on our website an extra, we call it extras, and I'm going to share my, my website now, my screen, and show you that if you go to the issues section of the Change Agent website and you go to the When We Fight, We Win tab and click on it, and then you click on Read Issue Extras, you'll see there's a PDF called Bringing Up LGBTQ Issues in the Classroom. And this is something that I created because I said to myself, well, if we're, you know, if we're proposing this possibility that you could bring up LGBTQ issues in the classroom, let me give teachers a little bit of support for how to do that. So I just made this list of steps you could take if you were thinking of doing it, and I encourage you to go ahead and download this and print it out. It's got these various steps, and it's got also includes some links to how to make ground rules in your class, because if you're going to have a hard conversation in your classroom, you might want to have ground rules. So those are some important links. Another important idea is just to make sure you have a clear sense of what your goals are. Why are you raising this issue? What are your hopes? Check in with yourself. Do you have support for doing this? You know, you might need to have somebody you can vent with or talk to before and after. You need to prepare your class with those ground rules, and also you need to give your class a chance to evaluate. It's really, really important after you're done with a hard conversation, or potentially hard. Let's not assume it's going to be hard, but let's say it's potentially hard, that you give people a chance to evaluate and say, you know, this didn't work for me, I didn't like this made me feel stressed, or whatever they want to say, or thank you so much for bringing this up, nobody talks about this. You know, my daughter is gay, I feel like we're never allowed to talk about it or never allowed to bring it up, and this made a huge difference in my life, thank you, you know, whatever it might be, make sure you invite the evaluation comments. There's a few articles here, including something by me that I wrote years ago about when homophobia really reared its ugly head in my classroom in a way that was pretty hurtful and hard, and so I wrote about it. So you can read that article, and then you can read another article by a teacher named Deb Schwartz, who writes about how she came out to her students. So that's one resource. Another hard conversation that can sometimes happen in class, and especially if you're bringing up inequality and that kind of thing, is along the lines of race. And again, go to our race issue, go to the extras, and you can see the second bullet is this piece called Best Practices for Talking About Race. I really encourage people to read this. Your online subscription to the Change Agent goes through today, so today's your last day. If you want to print any of these things out and have them to refer to, you can make copies and share them with other teachers. I really encourage you to do that. So the other thing, while I'm here in the Change Agent website, I just want to remind you the lesson packets that Bryce was mentioning. He was talking about lesson packet number 4, and you can just go to these lesson packets, and the packet number 4 I handed out to you, so you all have a hard copy of it. But if you want a clean copy, you can download it here, and you can download a bunch of other packets. There's some really good ones in here. I encourage you to browse around in here. You actually don't need a username and password for these. These are just freely available to anybody. But you do need a username and password for the audio. And I have to say, I was using this audio with my students just yesterday. I taught them how to log in. I taught them how to click on this word level. It resorts by level. And students can listen to this audio, and they were so happy. They were literally clutching my arm and just saying, this is the best thing ever. One student said, oh my God, I was just at the library trying to find audio, but it's so frustrating. And you know, with this audio, you can listen as well as read the text at the same time. And that was what turned it for her. She just said, all the other audio in the library, you know, you can only listen, you can't read it while you're listening. So that really makes a difference. Yeah, so just a quick reminder about the Change Agent here. You know, this current issue, this When We Fight, We Win issue, if you're going to subscribe, I would really do it now, because this, you'll still get this full color issue, which is a really lovely issue to have on hand and to share with students. I think after this issue, we're going back to our sort of typical black and white approach. Okay, so that's my little run through some resources for having hard conversations in the classroom. The race one, I briefly showed it to you here. I kind of distilled the bullet points down to one slide. One of the points here is that first one here, think programmatically. If you're going to be thinking about race and how race operates, you know, not just in your classroom or whatever, but in the program. You know, that's an important way to be thinking about how race operates. So yeah, go and download those resources if you can, and consider whether you want to bring this up. I would say that the most important thing for you to think about is it is not a mandate to do it by any means. Is it a mandate to bring up LGBTQ issues or race? You only want to do it if you feel like you have the trust, and the relationships in your class to navigate a hard conversation, if you feel like you have academic goals that are woven in, and if you feel like you're sort of internally clear that it's going to help you build community. I showed you some of the audio that you can get on our website, and I wanted to just give you a couple of pointers about how to use audio. One thing is just to make sure if you do get a username and password, which by the way only costs $20 per teacher per year, and once you get your $20 online subscription, you share your username and password with all your students. So there's no extra charge to have all of your students log in. And Bryce, I'm sorry, I know your students in prison cannot take advantage of this, but for others, this is a huge gift to them. They can listen to the audio. The articles are written by students, so they're going to feel like they're hearing from a peer, and they're going to be able to really practice their reading comprehension, their pronunciation, and see what level they feel comfortable at and watch themselves progress. Another idea is to give them an unpunctuated version of the article and ask them to punctuate it based on how it sounds. So, you know, when you are reading something out loud, a period and a comma have a certain kind of a sound to them. A question mark has a certain kind of a sound to it. An exclamation mark has a certain kind of a sound to it. So, you know, perhaps build towards this, you know, by thinking together about what those punctuation marks sound like, and then try it out. You know, they would have to put in the periods and put in the capital letters to show where sentences end and sentences begin. I think that could be a really powerful exercise. And another idea is just use it for dictation. You know, let them listen without looking at the text and have them write. Dictation is, you know, it sounds so old school, but it's really great, and students love dictation, and it's a great, they can then go back and check their own work, which is a huge way to immerse themselves in literacy practice, right? Because they have to look very carefully at spelling and punctuation and capitalization. So try, you know, covering the screen so they can't see it, and just play the sentences, you know, chunk by chunk, and let them write it down, and then go back and make their own corrections. Okay, it's about 4 minutes to 3. I want to just check the chat box and just open it up to any questions people might have. You know, you all, oh yeah, this slide is just to remind you that your free month of login time is sort of officially over today, and I invite you to subscribe or ask your program to subscribe on your behalf. As I've said probably way too many times already, it's so inexpensive. So it's a resource that you probably will be able to draw off of over and over and over again all year, and your students will benefit from all year. So please consider that. You just go to our website and find the subscription tab, and you'll see how to do it. So finally, I wanted to put this slide up. It has my email address on it. It has the website for the change agent. I want to thank Dana, Daisy, Bryce, and Tracy. Tracy, again, I'm so sorry we didn't get to hear your voice, but I'm so glad we got to have you in the room via your slides. And to the teachers who were able to present, thank you so much. That was so much creativity, so much brilliant teaching. Makes me so proud to think of the students that are out there benefiting from your incredible work, and really appreciate just knowing that you're out there doing what you do. Don't forget that Leanne is sending you a survey. It should come in your email right about now. So right as soon as you log off the webinar, just please open that email and do the survey. Your feedback is really important. And does anybody have any last comments? Any of our teachers or any of our participants?
Thank you. It's been my pleasure to work with you.
Yeah, Michael, thank you for being our tech support and getting this thing going, and thanks to ACE of Florida once again for just doing such great work in the state and for providing amazing support to me and to all the programs and teachers to just be, you know, doing the best that we can do. So thank you.